Recently, China made a big move in the military industry. A massive airship, 150 meters long, that is set to float up to 20 kilometers high. It claims to be able to track American F-35 stealth fighters from 2,000 kilometers away, and even the latest B-21 bomber couldn't escape. They're calling it the self-killer. At the same time, Chinese media is hyping up the so-called sixth-generation fighter jet, like it's about to leave the US military in the dust. But is any of that actually true? Let's break it down and see if these military headlines are real breakthroughs or just flashy propaganda. China's Shenzhen Institute of Optics, Fine Mechanics, and Physics claims this airship detects jets using infrared sensors that pick up heat from their engines. Its core tech includes a cadmium telluride mercury detector and a 300mm telescope tuned to a 2.8 to 4.3 micron wavelength range to minimize atmospheric interference. Sounds cutting edge, right? They also say it has signal-enhancing algorithms to amplify weak signals and filter out noise, making it seem like some next-level black technology. But reality has a way of bringing things back down to Earth. First problem, infrared signals weaken when passing through clouds, moisture, or dust storms. Even Chinese experts admit that if there's cloud cover, the detection range gets cut in half. It might work under clear skies, but what about fog, rain, or smog? In these conditions, it won't find stealth jets at all. Second problem, the telescope. A 300mm lens trying to spot a jet's exhaust 2,000 kilometers away is like standing in Beijing with a magnifying glass and trying to see a fly on a street in Shanghai. Even the best physics teacher would laugh at that idea. Optical resolution has its limits. No amount of fancy algorithms can change that. Third problem, the airship itself is a slow-moving target. It's 150 meters long, but only travels at 120 kilometers per hour. Western experts joke that it wouldn't last through a single meal in a war. A missile would turn it into fireworks in seconds. Lastly, surveillance coverage is limited. The telescope can only scan a small portion of the sky, meaning dozens of airships would be needed to monitor a large airspace. The cost and logistics would be overwhelming. In reality, airship surveillance isn't a new concept. During World War II, airships were used for reconnaissance, but once radar was developed, they became obsolete. China is bringing back an old idea with a high-tech makeover. It's a romantic notion, but in practical terms, it's more of a showpiece than a real stealth killer. There are some interesting technological aspects, but it's nowhere near the game-changer they're claiming it to be. At the end of 2024, 2 new fighter jets from Chung and Shenyang Aircraft Corporations made a big splash, and Chinese media went into overdrive, calling them sixth-generation fighters and suggesting they had already surpassed the US and Europe. Sounds exciting, right? But here's the catch. No one even knows what a sixth-generation fighter actually is. 50 years ago, military theorists first imagined an era of low-altitude, high-maneuverability combat. Once the concept was solidified, aircraft like the F-15, F-16, Su-27, and Su-35 were developed based on that vision. Later, the idea of stealth warfare took hold, leading to the creation of stealth jets, the 5th-generation fighters we have today. The same process applies to 6th-generation jets. There needs to be a clear, well-defined theory of how future air combat will work before actual planes can be designed. Right now, that theory doesn't exist. 5th-generation fighter jets dominate 4th-generation ones because of their stealth capabilities. So what groundbreaking feature does a 6th-generation jet need? The US is still exploring this question in labs, yet China claims to be ahead. The idea of a 6th-generation jet that Chinese nationalists fantasize about is just a mix of existing technologies. Stealth, high speed, high altitude capabilities, and some spaceflight potential. Maybe even low altitude maneuverability. But these are all rehashed ideas, not a vision for the future. No one actually knows what 6th-generation air combat will look like, what kind of jets will be needed, or what functions they should serve. Without a clear theory, there's no way to build a true 6th-generation fighter. For comparison, the F-22 and F-35, as 5th-generation jets, have an overwhelming advantage over 4th-generation ones like the F-15 and F-16, sometimes outmatching them by dozens of times. That's a generational gap. Now, can the new planes from Chengdu and Shenyang Aircraft Corporations dominate the J-20 or F-35 at the same level? Absolutely not. These new jets are just enhanced versions of stealth technology, more advanced than the J-20 and J-35, but still within the realm of fifth-generation improvements. Chungu's design follows a flying wing layout, removing vertical tails and canards while packing in 3 engines. Sure, it improves stealth, but it's just an upgraded version of existing stealth tech, like calling an iPhone 14 plus an iPhone 20. It's still far from a breakthrough. Some Chinese media even claim that this Chungu jet can reach speeds of Mach 5 or 6. That's just treating the audience like fools because, first, the wide, flat shape of a flying wing design is inherently unsuitable for hypersonic speeds. To go that fast, a jet needs to be sleek and aero-like to minimize drag. But a flying wing setup has massive air resistance. Second, stealth and hypersonic speeds don't mix. High-speed flight requires friction, generating intense heat and boosting infrared emissions, which completely negate stealth. Just look at the US B-2 and B-21 bombers. They all stick to subsonic speeds for a reason. So the idea of a hypersonic stealth fighter contradicts itself. On top of that, Chinese fighter jet specifications are often overhyped online, only for reality to cut them down later. For example, before the J-20's official specs were released, the internet was filled with claims that it could reach Mach 3. When the actual numbers came out, it was only Mach 2. Similarly, the internet estimates its range at over 5,000 kilometers, but the official classification is just medium to long range. Meanwhile, the J-15, which has a max range of 3,000 kilometers, is labeled as a long-range jet, implying the J-20's range is actually less than that. In other words, if someone claims that this new Chungu jet can fly at Mach 5 or 6, the real number is probably closer to Mach 3 at best. As for Shenyang's so-called 6th-generation jet, its design is completely different from Chungu's flying wing approach. At least Chungu's model leans into stealth. But Shenyang's version has a diamond-shaped delta wing, a bulky fuselage, and engines mounted on top. It looks like a hybrid between a medium-sized fighter and an unmanned combat drone, but it's nowhere near the scale or capabilities of a true 6th-generation fighter. With such a disorganized design approach, it's clear this jet is nowhere near ready. In other words, this is just a concept model or scaled-down prototype. It's nowhere close to being combat ready. The bottom line, the new jets from Chungu and Shenyang are just stealth-enhanced 5th-generation fighters dressed up as 6th generation for hype. If China wants to convince the world, they need solid theories, real data, and actual performance in combat. Otherwise, their so-called 6th-generation fighter is all show and no substance.